3, 2, 1, and we're back. Welcome to Sunday Podcast. We always like to start out with a disclaimer on Sunday. This is not the normal Tim and Julie Harris Real Estate Coaching Podcast. That's where we actually are prepared and have outlines and are, planning on giving you guys education, motivation, hopefully enough so to get you into action. But on Sunday, we just talk about whatever the heck we want to talk about.
Anything goes.
Anything goes. And oftentimes we try to talk about things that are of personal interest to us that have absolutely nothing to do with real estate. And I think in some cases, based on your feedback, some of the things we introduce you guys to are things that are of interest to you as well, which tells me that we all have a shared hive brain, basically.
Indeed.
I mean, in past podcasts, we've talked about the boom in sex dolls.
Right, and aliens.
We've talked about aliens. We've talked about, indigenous critters in Puerto Rico and those that were not indigenous, like alligators and, huge iguanas and all these crazy things. And I guess I appreciate you guys listening and giving us feedback on the Sunday shows, liking the fact that we're so free-flowing on Sunday because, frankly, it gives us a good relief. And that's really what this podcast is. It's our opportunity to defrag from the previous week and sort of prepare for the upcoming week. We try to sprinkle in the real estate stuff just to make sure, in entrepreneurial stuff, just to make sure you guys are staying frosty and prep for the next week. But also, this is our opportunity to have a collective sigh of relief and, kind of celebrating another week behind us and looking forward to the week in front of us.
Yes, indeed. And so we can start with adventures in, our afternoon walk. I think that's one of my favorite parts of the day with you because we get to talk about all kinds of different things, what we've heard on calls and
we listen to podcasts,
and we listen to podcasts,
Yeah.
and we kind of get updated with what's going on. And a lot of it affects you guys, so you might hear about some things that we learn on our walk. But it's also sort of like, okay, what's going to happen this time around? And I remember one day last week we were walking, and these guys maybe don't know, but we live at the Ritz-Carlton Dorado Beach in Puerto Rico. And part of the property is, it's 1,300 acres, and the Rockefeller Nature Trail goes past a beach, and it goes through some neighborhoods, it goes through the jungle, and you get a little bit of everything that way, some ocean breezes. And I remember, I don't know, it probably was Monday, considering, and we're walking through the jungle, and we hear this giant thunk. And I thought, what in the world was that? And it was a little windy, but you never know what you're going to see. It was just a coconut falling from, 40 feet in the air. Thank God it wasn't on your head, So that's always an adventure, trying to walk and dodge things at the same time, though they do a pretty good job taking them off.
Why doesn't Puerto Rico have Bigfoot lore?
It probably does. It's probably just in Spanish, and I haven't discovered it yet.
We need to start it.
Absolutely. That's a good thing. That's
right.
a good research project.
You have a Bigfoot that's basically, just think through this, yeah. I mean, where we're from in Columbus, Ohio, there wasn't a Bigfoot thing, but there was in southern Ohio.
There was, for sure.
Yeah, and up in Canada, they call them different things. Why isn't there something in the Caribbean? What would we call them?
I don't know.
I don't know. We're going to work on that.
Well, I will figure that out.
Yeah. We need to start something that gets other people talking.
See, this is very tempting for spicing up homeschool. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so can I?
So that was just one day. Was the coconut that came from nowhere?
The coconut, the life-ending
coconut,
right? And so we were walking home, and after 6 miles, and it's pretty hot here and humid and whatnot, and it helps to have a good podcast, or in our case 2 to 3 to listen to as we're walking around. We listen to a lot of current event podcasts, but Julie and I also listen to a lot of episodal podcasts just because they're kind of interesting. And again, we're intentionally trying to unplug from the normal rigmarole of life. So we're walking the path, and we come across this massive iguana, and this thing was so freaking big. We're not sure if it was a male or a female. I think it was a female. Julie thinks it was a male. I don't even know how the hell to tell the difference.
How do you sex and... Yeah, that's what they call it,
A sexing an iguana?
Yeah, like when you go to get a goldfish, the fish people go, okay, you got to sex it.
Are you saying you thought that iguana was sexy?
No. Thank God. No, it hasn't come to that yet. You better hope not. But the fish people always, they know how to tell boy and girl fish apart. I don't know. I don't know how to sex an iguana. I don't.
Okay, well,
it's a good thing, because that would be scary if I
You could just GTS it real quick and just find the different, Google that, SHIT.
Anyway, it was a big one is the bottom line.
Well, anyway, it was a big one, totally unafraid of us, completely made us walk around it, and did not move.
We're not talking like an aquarium iguana, guys. We're talking about probably a good 5 foot including his tail.
Well, you're 5'5", and this thing
yeah.
probably stem to stern was almost as long as you.
Probably.
If you were, yeah.
Yeah, and as robust as maybe, say, a Jack Russell Terrier in the middle, like kind of beefy.
Yeah.
And very green. And he would look, or she would look you right in the eye. Usually, like, if you're in a golf cart, they'll scurry off. But walking on the path, they're like, no, this is my path. I'm sunning. Go
Exactly.
around.
That's what was going on. And we did.
We did.
Yes.
Got some good pictures, though.
Right. And so we're coming home like the following day, almost in the same exact spot. And one of our neighbors were out, and we asked them if they saw this monster iguana. It's not so unusual to see monster iguanas in Puerto Rico, but it is unusual to see them where we live. The things are non-indigenous, and they're very, very destructive. If you've ever been to Puerto Rico before, you'll remember how, in some cases, the roads are atrocious. And the reason is because the iguanas, these big, locomotive iguanas, they burrow underneath the roads, and they cause the roads to collapse. And there's all kinds of other problems that they create. They eat everything. They're just, they have no natural predators, or so we thought.
Indeed.
So we're walking home, and we stumble across our neighbors, and we tell them, there's another giant iguana that's out there. Did you see it? And they said no. To which they then said, did you see that the fact that there was a 6-foot-long alligator or longer that was essentially next door to you? And Julie and I were like,
caught like this morning.
Yeah, and we're like, no, you're making that up. There is no, because there are no alligators or crocodiles in Puerto Rico.
There's not supposed to be anyway.
Right, and so nobody knows for sure how they get here, but the belief is that when there's a storm, the eggs will float in, or they'll come in on fallen trees, or just who knows what. But they do make it here, and then the eggs will, hatch, and they'll live their lives in some of these internal water retention things, both natural ponds and man-made and whatever. And yeah, occasionally you hear a story about, they discovered a 10-foot long alligator and whatever. Well, so evidently, one of these big guys was 6 houses down from us.
Yeah.
And it's like, you got to think to yourself, okay, it's an alligator. Got that. Yeah. Seen it before, understand it. But the thing that's amazing is when those things are born, they're tiny.
Yeah, well, for a little while.
Right. But so if that thing has gone from being a tiny little thing,
So, like, it has to be, I don't know how big a full-grown alligator is, but pretty darn close, at least an adult. And, when you guys are picturing this is not like, normal subdivisions, so to speak. This is more like, the houses back to a meadow that used to be a golf course. There's a big lagoon, a big lake there, and then behind that is the ocean. So, I can understand how it came from somewhere, given that there's water and meadows and, places to hide and things to eat. And what makes this even more believable is the fact that, you remember a few months ago when I was taking Zoe to school, or picking her up, and I got an email that said, guess what? You guys need to be careful, especially if you park next to the pond, because there's an alligator we have to catch.
Well, this was last year.
But my point is, even though they're not supposed to be here, I believe it even more because we'd had that previous incident of, be careful around the pond when you're picking your kid up.
Another reason for homeschooling, by the way.
Like, what the heck?
Yeah, but it was
maybe
just funny.
Maybe it was that one. Maybe he got
because
over
ultimately, it's what you're saying. So that thing to have gone from nothing to 6 foot long, it's had to have been basically hanging out in
somewhere.
our neighborhood for I don't even know how long. I don't know how. I know nothing about alligators. So I'm going to keep it that way.
But maybe that explains why there's fewer iguanas than
That's my point. That's where I was going with this big picture. Make sure you've got that near your mouth. So yeah, that's where I was going with it. Is I think that there's essentially a socio or psychopathic alligator that's been taking out the big iguanas.
Well, it's 2020, so chances
are
good.
Since we're talking about something totally bizarre, walking on the path another day, same exact scenario, and this pond that Julie was just describing to you guys, it's not really a pond, it's a lake, and it's like it's right behind our property basically, and we saw a giant turtle.
Oh yeah.
Eating
that was disgusting.
Medium-sized iguana head first.
And I thought, until that very moment, I thought turtles were pretty cute.
Yeah, but
this
it was
disgusting.
It was
my
disgusting.
God, it was just horrifying.
It was horrifying.
Oh, I'm so glad Zoe wasn't with us that day.
But she
would have been a look away moment.
But she would have thought it was very interesting.
But you can't unsee that. That's just really gross. So before our conversation peaks, what else have you got?
I'm just trying to think if we've seen other horrifying things. Well, hey, we escaped a hurricane this week.
Yes, I kind of, I don't know. I was thinking about what to compare that to, but there really, I mean, for us, it was basically a few good thunderstorms and some rain, but it just goes to show how unpredictable weather like that is, because, that whole day before and the night before, we had like 7 different weather alerts, hurricane statements, and they were predicting winds up to 65 miles an hour and 8 to 10 inches of rain. And I think we got like a half an inch and 15 miles an hour. I'm sure there's other parts of the island that got it worse than we did, but that's supposed to hook up pretty soon with Hurricane Marco, which just formed, and head for the Gulf Coast. So those of you guys who are anywhere from Texas to the Gulf Coast of Florida, keep an eye on that, because it's 2020, and I guess a couple of dual hurricanes haven't gotten together in a long time.
Yeah, exactly.
If there's a year for it, I guess that explains it.
Well, I mean, this has been a wackadoodle year. That's the thing. I mean, earlier we were talking in a past podcast, we've been talking about the locusts that returned, the flying snakes that were supposedly, just all
some
sorts
asteroids.
But yeah, exactly. And then it's pretty funny. There seems to be a steady sort of drumbeat, though it's...
Yeah, there was a fire tornado last week.
What's the musical term, Julie, when the drumbeat is increasing? Tenor?
Yes.
Is that it? Tenor?
Yeah, and I just got an alert that Tropical Storm Marco now upgraded to an actual hurricane, Category 1 for now anyway.
And Marco and Laura have met up in the Gulf, and they're basically,
they're probably
going to
spin off some tornadoes. I don't know.
Well, but I have noticed, and I like to send these articles to you, that there's an increased tenor in the number of stories about UFOs.
There is.
Yeah.
I do wonder whether that's because, they've known about this for a while, and they just kind of sliding it into some otherwise weirdo news so that we don't all wig out. I don't know. But it's pretty credible sources, though, is the interesting thing.
I'm natural skeptic, and every time I hear anything and read anything
It's
like
drones.
that, I always go, my mind thinks, well, what are they trying to distract us from?
Mm-hmm.
Honestly. That's what it feels
right,
like
I
to
think
me.
you're right, especially as close to the election and stuff like that.
Right.
So, lots of bizarrities to track. But, that I think the overall theme that you and I have been working on, not that our Sunday shows usually have a theme other than the weirdness of everything, is just the general uncertainty of pretty much everything. You can look at any piece of your life, really, and say, all right, so where's that going? Okay, so we had a bunch of uncertainty about homeschooling. Now we're all trying to adjust to that. There's uncertainty in the economy. Why is it that both the stock market and gold are doing well at the same time? That's not supposed to happen.
That's crazy.
And of course, the housing market has lots of uncertainty in it. And I see that on our premier coaching calls. I see that, it's not all that consistent. People are having different types of experiences now than they had before, and that's just adding to the uncertainty.
Are you running to your safe place on our podcast
Yeah,
talking about real estate?
I'm going towards your Forbes article.
I know, but you're running to your safe place. So I want to talk about more crazy things first.
That's fine.
Okay.
I was kind of out of crazy.
I know. I got limitless amount of crazy.
Okay.
My crazy can go on for hours.
That's probably true.
Yeah. Okay, but good news.
Yes.
Supposedly
Let's do
tonight, Sunday at 6
yes,
p.m.
This is great news.
Yeah.
I think.
Did you read? You haven't?
I did.
Go ahead.
Let me just pull that up. You can tee it up.
So there's an article that was it came out in Bloomberg, and now it's sort of making its way. But it is pretty hilarious how they're making this article so damn political. But evidently, there's actually a viable therapy for the coronavirus that Trump is going to talk about on national TV today at 6:00. But again, because everything's you can't just talk about anything that's even remotely good news that will benefit the current administration. So they had to spin it. So these articles that came out were basically about Trump, telling the FDA to get off their butts and move faster, and that their bureaucratic processes are too slow. And so here it is, a possible therapy, which is about as close you're going to get to a vaccine in the short while for coronavirus, and which everyone should be celebrating. And yet it's being spun up as, Trump being unsympathetic to the FDA bureaucrats. I thought that was hilarious.
So this says President Trump is expected to hold a press conference Sunday evening regarding a major therapeutic breakthrough. It's funny how they even write this quote breakthrough with quotes around it. For treating COVID-19, the White House said late Saturday night. So that's coming up tonight. And it goes on to talk about the press conference comes as the president suggested that the FDA was deliberately slowing down clinical trials for therapeutics and vaccines for the coronavirus. And then, of course, that was widely criticized. And we'll see how it actually goes
But
tonight.
they probably were purposely slowing it down just because their process is innately slow.
Sure. And, there has never been such pressure because the numbers and because, this is a worldwide pandemic. It's different than maybe something that was only affecting a certain number of people in a certain place. So, it probably was legitimately slow, but now this is a thing for tonight to keep an eye on.
Yeah, well, so that could be great news.
But the numbers are, the charts that you sent and the graphs really do support that this could be a good thing. I think the thing to pay attention to on this was it was most effective if it was given in the first 4 days, particularly the first 2 days. And then starting the 5th day after you knew you were infected, it started to diminish its effectiveness. And so a lot of the reporting, if you kind of deep dive that article, a lot of the previous reporting about how they didn't think it was effective was because it was first used on patients in the hospital that already were pretty sick. And so now they've rewound it and said, this needs to be like as soon as you know that you've tested, it's going to be more effective.
Yeah.
So it's always the devil's in the details,
Well, so Julie and I had a theory, and I'm going to stick to it. I'm not going to say our timing was right with our theory, but I'm going to stick to it. I think that we are being, I think there's going to be a human renaissance.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think the renaissance, and we talked about this even during our normal podcast, but truly that's what it feels like. And just to encapsulate all of it, because I think you guys are at least wanting to feel this way, and you're maybe internally starting to lean in that direction. Generally speaking, if you think about life in general, but more specifically, trends, the pendulum, right? The pendulum has a tendency to swing too far to one direction, too far to the other. I'm about to sneeze.
Bless you in advance. Caught it.
And yeah, I kind of did.
Kind of. Bless you.
Not coronavirus. I've been tested.
Nope.
So the pendulum has a tendency to swing too far one direction than too far another direction, right?
Yes, that's right.
And I think what we're starting to see are people growing weary of the pendulum having swung too far to the direction that's been swinging in for.
I agree.
You're right.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's there yet. People aren't like, all right, I've had enough of that. We're not doing that anymore. We're going to do something else. But what you're starting to see is the weight of the pendulum now.
Sure.
I think it's reached its zenith in essence, and the weight of it's going to start pulling it back so that it swings back the opposite direction. And then eventually what happens is the pendulum, if you guys can, visualize this, stops somewhere in the middle. And that's pretty much how everything works. And I think what we're starting to see is people growing weary of being weary.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like drama exhaustion.
Yeah, exactly. Well, which realtors very rarely have.
They have a higher tolerance.
They have a higher tolerance. Sure. But, I think that's what we're experiencing.
Years of building it up. Yeah. Well, I think that that's true. And I think that, I think we all collectively hope that there will be a collective sigh of relief that, all right, we're rounding the bend on this thing. And I do think that a therapeutic or a vaccine will be the catalyst for something huge. And I also think that it's a demonstration, what is it called? Operation Warp Speed, to get it done faster. And we're not talking a little bit faster. Your average vaccine, I think, takes like 10 years to develop or something. And they may be able to do it in, 18 months, 12 months, something like that. But it's also, I think, representative of what you're alluding to, a renaissance and enlightenment, showing that we can all move on certain things much more quickly now, probably, partially because of technology. I mean, look at how far, for example, Elon Musk has gone as a private entrepreneur in space, of all things, in less than 10 years. I read this week that he's now I think he's the 4th richest man on the planet and came from nothing.
His net worth this year has increased something like $60 to $70 billion.
Isn't that amazing?
This year.
I mean, talk about speed.
That's a good year.
That's a good year.
Yeah.
And think about how quickly, even though maybe for several months it seemed painfully, but think about how quickly we've all converted to online everything. Everything. Right? Not just school, but online. We're doing Zoom meetings and you guys are doing presentations online. We have had to adapt very quickly. And I think looking back, we'll see a lot of technological advances that happened fast. All of these things that we have to kind of deal with. And even as a society, to maybe put in place some things that we probably should have been more sensitive to earlier, like, wear a mask when you're sick, stuff like that.
It's not, everyone always talks about the go-tos, right? Or they talk about housing trends. Everyone talks about restaurant, all these types of businesses that are obviously basically essentially going to be forced to change. But there's so many, like, think for example, if you were a physician, right? You can now do telemedicine.
Sure.
Where you can essentially have patients all over the planet and you can essentially have this big medical practice that's not, predicated on you being in a geographic location anymore.
Well, but now that's seen as not hokey or witchcraftery,
Right.
or
Compromised.
secondary compromise.
Right.
Somebody's just throwing that together. Just like homeschool's become normal now. The telemedicine is becoming more normal. Zoe's had a couple of colds during this whole thing, and sometimes he comes to our house. Sometimes he's just like, give me the symptoms over video, and then I have a prescription in an hour. It's pretty awesome.
So
I like that.
So Zoe's starting. This is last week. So Zoe was starting to, develop some sort of sickness, and we could tell from a mile away because back when she was going to school, she was coming home with some plague every 2 weeks, it seemed. And so, we picked up on the early signs that she was getting an ear infection or something, her usual thing, though she hasn't had a single one of those since the pandemic started, just for the record.
Her brown lines under her eyes.
Yep.
And general crankiness.
Anyway, so we asked her, Zoe, what happened? Oh, I don't know. I don't feel good. So the doctor then, does his thing, comes to our house actually, and then checks her out and says there's sand in her ears. It's like sand in your ears, huh, Zoe? And then for the first time she goes, some boy threw sand at me.
Yep.
He was picking on me. Some boy at the beach threw sand at me.
Because I finally caved and let her go to summer camp, thinking that it's pretty safe because it's just 4 kids per counselor, and they're basically in the ocean all day in salt water, so it probably should be safe, but this is my payback for it.
So then Julie goes, Julie reports to me, some boy there, I think I knew it was, threw sand on our poor little innocent daughter, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, whatever. There's no way Zoe is telling Julie the whole story.
I know. You're right.
Julie and I walk into Zoe's room, and I said, Zoe, I want to hear what really happened with this sand and this boy. And I said, Zoe, if you tell us the truth, we won't be proud of you. We won't be mad at you, sorry. We won't be mad at you. And then she turns away and she thinks about it for probably about 3 seconds, which was kind of funny. And then she turns back to us and she says, fine. I threw sand at him first.
That's right. Just had to give her permission to tell the truth.
Yep, but it was hilarious, though, because of course she's the one that started it.
Of course she started it.
Exactly.
I know, tiny but mighty.
Yeah,
that's right.
Little bully.
I know. She's going to get her clock cleaned one of these days.
No, she's too cute.
Know. No, hopefully.
Yeah, that's the thing. So. When you're a tiny little adorable girl, you can get away with pretty much any. Well, look what she's getting away with, for example.
I know, totally. As we speak, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so let's forward this conversation, and the real takeaway that we're learning, and hopefully all you guys are learning, is versatility.
Yeah,
not just with how you basically look at life, but how you treat your fellow humans. Because if it's the phases of grief thing. Remember, long-time listeners, we were kind of tying in the phases of acceptance of the new, wherever the new world will be, the post-pandemic or, post-coronavirus world, what that's actually going to feel and look like. And so many of us, I did too, and Julie did too, we went through these different stages of mourning. I remember back in February when we were realizing that there's this global pandemic and all these uncertainties, which, by the way, are largely still there. Nobody really knows anything about this damn thing.
Yep.
There's new articles coming out every day, and most of us had probably just tuned out and just accepted the fate. You
got to get on with life.
Yep. But yeah, so I remember Julie and I introduced the concept that what we were all experiencing were the phases of grief, and sort of you got to go through them, but you don't want to linger too long in any of the particular phases, at least the first 3 in particular, because the world's going to pass you by, and your ultimate goal is to get to acceptance. And I think that's where people have gotten or are getting on a they're going to on a whole. The part of the population that worries me are all these people, mostly in the cities, who are hoping and praying that the world stays on lockdown forever. What's the end game for that? That doesn't work. I mean, I don't know. It's fascinating. We're going to talk about real estate trends. The article Julie was referring to here a second ago. And if you look at the macro trends that, like, I remember the CEO of Zillow came out and said, we're seeing no evidence that the move away from the cities is something that's going to be, a permanent, trend in real estate. Wrong.
Yeah,
Wrong. That was absolutely not. Now what we're seeing is the trend is the pace is increasing. And you're going to see as a result of, so just to finish the loop of what I was just talking about, so if you know people that are sort of trying to stick into this lockdown lifestyle, which is what we're going to start calling it, have sympathy for them, right? But don't get stuck in that rut yourself, because life does not stay stationary. You can't stay complacent. If you try to stay in this lockdown lifestyle, and mentally, emotionally, and financially, you're going to go broke because the world's going to pass you by. And it's going to be 10 years or 20 years from now, and you're still going to be living the lockdown lifestyle. And you all know people who have never quite got back from completely the recession of '07 through, whenever. There went a parrot, by the way, that crazy noise. So don't get stuck there. You guys got to move forward. And the easiest way to do it is just disengage from your own fears, disengage from your ego, and always attach to the fact that your highest and truest purpose on this planet is to be of service to other people. So if you start thinking in terms of how can I help people as a real estate practitioner, you can help people as a real estate practitioner through the most profound ways. You can help them buy or sell home. You can help them the accomplishment of a dream. And what we're thinking is going to happen, what appears to be happening, and we're going to stay with this because I haven't found any real. Now it's confirmation bias at this point,
right?
But I really do believe we're on the beginning stages of what's going to feel like a renaissance.
Mm-hmm.
You and I we kind of put that thought together a couple months ago, but I really do feel that is going to happen. I think
so,
it
too.
does appear that there's going to be a viable vaccine for the coronavirus,
mm-hmm.
and it might very well be in place immediately.
Soonish.
Right, and here's the other thing, and you mentioned this too. You're looking at the wealth effect, if you want to call it what maybe what it is, that there's no clear turn in the road. So in other words, if some of you are not invested at all, so you're just catching the headlines and you're not paying attention to it, but the stock market is going crazy. And then at the same time, as Julie said, you have gold prices that are going crazy. Gold's going to most likely, all the biggest investors or whatnot Warren Buffett, guys, is buying gold, and Warren Buffett is probably one of the most vocal about not buying gold. He's the one that said, only humans, if aliens were to visit Earth, this is I think what he says, they would think it was crazy how humans spend all this time, money, and resources to dig up, this yellow metal out of the ground in one part of the world just to bury it in another part of the world.
Right.
But it's kind of a funny quote, which made a lot of people hung their hat on that. The world's greatest investor, and he's bad mouthing the idea of investing in gold. Well, guess what? He's buying gold. He bought Barrick Gold, which is a gold miner stock, which they also have a lot of gold themselves. Basically the gold in the ground. But Barrick is probably one of the it is the largest gold miner in the world, and they're also the go-to stock if you want to basically hedge your portfolio. So traditionally, people will buy gold as in essence an insurance policy towards their other assets deflating. So gold would historically, for 4,000 or 5,000 years, gold has been seen as money, right? For how many years has the U.S. dollar? 300 years? Mm-hmm. And really the U.S. dollar is only...
only 200, because people don't know this, but about the first 100 years of the country's existence, money was not even consistently the same thing. People had IOU notes. They were learning how to write checks. They had some British money. They had... they would trade in other assets before it actually became a real currency.
Well, so it became the global, de facto global currency, after World War II,
yeah,
in essence. And then, fast forward to now.
A much shorter history than gold, certainly.
That's the point.
Yeah.
So gold's basically been seen as money for 4,000 to 5,000 years since the advent of just trade in general. Yeah. Well, so, that's... When somebody is a gold investor, what they're essentially doing is they're buying gold because they don't believe that, for example, the U.S. dollar will have the same buying power as it does now, or they don't believe that their other assets are going to retain value. So it's essentially seen as an insurance policy. I think in modern era of financial planning, that's how it was seen. Everyone would say, have 10% of your portfolio in gold. So enough about that, right? But Warren Buffett has bought gold last quarter, and that really, really set the world on edge, because why would this guy, who's been if anything, he made fun of buying gold, why would he now be saying buy gold? It's the only reason is because he's hedging against what might be happening next in the global economy. At the same time, the economy continues to go through, or the stock market continues to go through the roof. At the same time, we still have double-digit unemployment. And
Yes.
we still
housing is still doing overall generally pretty well.
So if you're wanting to sort of decode why all that is, so just, the stock market, generally speaking, is a forward-looking indicator of people's beliefs of what those companies will be worth in the future, or what they're able to produce in the future. So when you buy, Apple at $500 a share or whatever it is, you're buying it with the belief that Apple shares are going to be worth, more in the future because of the products that they deliver to consumers and, that kind of thing. Their sales will increase. That's the belief, right? So if you're buying gold, you're believing that that won't happen. So that's essentially, stock market forward-looking indicator, essentially people expressing their optimism with spending money, and gold essentially is a hedge against the future being brighter than the past. But when you have both going up at the same time, you have to ask yourself, why is that happening? And the only reason that's happening, the primary reason it's happening, is because the Fed is spending trillions of dollars to essentially keep the stock market afloat. In other words, the government is buying securities just like a private investor would or Warren Buffett would. And the stock market is saying, we're going to, people are investing in the stock market because fear of missing out. They don't want to miss the train as it continues to leave the station. But then if you look at why is that train leaving the station, it's not because of the traditional reasons, being that people are purchasing securities because of their optimism for the fact that security might be worth more in the future. That's not what it is. It's because they're seeing that the government, this is what the big investors are doing. They're seeing that the government has essentially locked itself into a long-term, who knows how long-term is, cycle of having to continue to spend trillions and trillions of dollars to support the U.S. economy. So when you think at, how is it housing being supported? Through low interest rates, that's how. And why is there a housing boom going on? And why will we think it's part of this new renaissance, why it's going to transform into other mini housing booms? And we're about to share with you some points that we dug up to support that. And it's because the government's going to continue to underwrite, support all of our spending. And even if you're debt-free, chances are the people doing business with you are able to do business with you because they're using debt. So everything in the United States is based on essentially productivity, yes, but productivity around people's ability essentially to borrow money. No productivity if you can't borrow money to buy whatever it is that person has for sale. So the whole entire economy is based on borrowed money, in essence. So as we move forward and you're thinking about why is it all these things are happening at the same time, it's for the reason I just stated. Something close to $20 trillion has been injected into the U.S. economy from the Fed since the beginning of the year, effectively, since February. And there's no end in sight. Certainly not the Democrats, and certainly not the Republicans. They're all essentially playing the same, Keynesian, they're going to continue doing it. And so called quantitative easing, called CARES Act, called whatever you're going to call it, it's called, there's going to be, now when does it end? Who knows? And that's why Warren Buffett's buying gold, because he believes, and a lot of people believe, there is going to have to be an end to it. There will be a time when the bill will come due. There will be a time when, the money isn't so cheap anymore. And so it's when other people aren't willing to buy the debt instruments. And I'll give you an example. Who would buy, raise your hand right now, podcast listeners, if you would actually buy a long-term U.S. Treasury bond that paid a point or less, like a 30-year Treasury bond that paid 1%. Would you buy that bond? Would you invest your money long-term? In essence, would you loan the U.S. government money at essentially no interest and tie your money up for 30 years for 1%? You wouldn't do it, would you? Well, nobody will do it. And so guess who's buying those debt instruments? The U.S. government is buying their own debt instruments so they can essentially loan more money. And I know that sounds insane, but that's really what's happening. So there's this circle happening. They're saying we need to print more money. In order to print more money, we have to essentially issue more debt. And there's no one that wants to buy our debt at these no interest rate, bond rates. And so we're going to buy it ourselves. That's really what's going on right now. And as long as that continues, as long as we're able to continue it, then there's going to be a lot of upward momentum in asset prices. And it's probably going to be the increase in cost of things through inflation is really what we're getting at here. It's going to start being incredibly noticeable. I was reading several articles about how much food has increased in price since the beginning of the year. That's inflation. When you see house prices increase as much as they have over the last 5 years, especially 6 years maybe, that's inflation. But you're going to start seeing inflation creep into every single thing that's in the economy, and that's going to put a downward. Eventually, the other side of it is there will be something. The worst case scenarios will be hyperinflation, where things just go crazy out of whack with what people their ability to buy things. So just normal, meat and potatoes, quite literally, will become unaffordable by normal people because they won't have the income to afford it. And so you're going to see prices that will change throughout the day. I mean, that's your worst case scenario, right? Like you'll walk in and milk will be $5 a gallon, but by the time you walk out, it's going to be $6.50. These things have historically happened in world economies where they have allowed their fiat currency to go amok. The biggest difference is there's never been a global reserve currency, and that's what the U.S. dollar is for the entire world after the agreements after World War II. So when you hear all these people using the examples of the Weimar Republic in Germany and all these other things in these sort of backwater countries, and you're asking, well, is that same thing going to happen here? I don't think it can, because there is no follow-up currency that's looking to replace the U.S. dollar. And guys, we're nerding out like we always do on Sunday. But unless there's a viable alternative, like for example, if you wanted to go, this is the reason there's so much hype around Bitcoin and gold, one of the undercurrent reasons why. So let's say, for example, you want to go and you want to sell something. It doesn't matter what you want to sell. Make something up, right? You want to sell a box of eggs, let's say, a carton of eggs. And let's say that carton of eggs, you can sell it for, what does a carton of eggs cost? I don't even know. We get ours from a local farmer, right?
Yeah. Well, let's just choose $5.
Okay, $5. Right. All right. So these eggs, they have serviceability. You can eat them. You can trade them with somebody they have something for sale that you want. Maybe they want your eggs, kind of thing. Barter it, whatever, right? You'll pay somebody your eggs to fix your fence, that type of thing. But if someone comes along and they offer you $5 in cash for US dollar for your eggs, and you then have to decide whether, if you take that $5, whether that $5 is going to buy you in the future, maybe the same day, the same value as what you could get for those eggs had you traded them or bartered them or whatever. I mean, this is
my grandma used to tell me a story about that she remembered. I don't know whether she read about this or experienced it, but during the Depression, that people eventually said that the loaf of bread was worth more to them than the grocery cart full of cash it took to buy it with, because it like you said, by the end of the day, it actually had more value than the cash it took to buy it.
Well, those pictures of people using wheelbarrows of cash to buy, right? Those are real. Those are real.
That
yeah.
is not mythology.
We Googled it because we thought they were fake.
Yeah. Well, no, I remember her telling me about it. But
right.
Yeah.
So what's now? Okay, stay with me here. Julie and I are obviously not experts on any of this. We're
armchair economists.
Armchair economists, not even barely in an armchair. Mm-hmm. So just keep in mind that we're probably fumbling over terms and not saying things precisely, but conceptually, just stay with us. So. And we always get emails after this and people trying to correct us with our facts and our factoids, which I actually appreciate because it helps me learn. The mosquito flew over here.
I'm going to get it.
I know.
I am going
There's
to
a mosquito that's haunting Julie and I.
We never have mosquitoes where we are right now, but
No.
I think it's from the rain.
Of course.
This one had a taste of me. He's coming back for me, and I'm going to win.
I know. Well, me too. He's going from you to me, but he hasn't gotten us yet.
Vicious.
All right. So with regards to currency, let's say you're back there, you're wanting to sell the eggs. Somebody wants to buy your eggs, and they're going to offer you $5 in U.S. cash, which you're not really positive is going to have buying power of the egg equivalency going forward, or they're going to offer you $5 of some other currency, or maybe gold, right? So the thing about gold, for example, is that it's been money for 4,000 to 5,000 years. You know that gold is worth the same thing all over the planet. There's nothing else on the planet Earth that's worth the same thing wherever you go. It's called spot price. So if you buy an ounce of gold right now, it costs roughly $2,000. And then you take it to any place on planet Earth, and it's worth, guess what? $2,000. Other currencies don't work like that. Like when you guys have, if you've traveled outside the United States and you have to go into a country like that accepts euros, you at the airport or whatever, you'll go and you'll take your dollars and you'll exchange them for euros. And your dollar typically isn't, you're gonna have to actually spend $1.20 or something like that. I don't know what the exchange rate is to get the equivalent of one euros. In other words, our money's worth less than the euro, and all these different financial consternations that makes one currency worth less than the other. But there is no global currency except gold. So Bitcoin, they've been trying to make digital currency an alternative to gold, which it definitely has its attributes. There's no doubt. And no, we don't have any Bitcoin. So yeah, that's what's going to happen. Unless that happens, unless people basically are given an option of accepting for their goods or services a different form of currency, or a different currency, form being digital or gold, or currency being an actual, country that's issued maybe a gold-backed currency, right? Unless that happens, the U.S. dollar is still going to, I think the word is hegemony, right? The U.S. dollar is still going to maintain its power all over the world because there is no viable alternative. And so when people ask me, like I had a coaching client actually ask me, I had two last week, asked me what our predictions were for next year. And my predictions, honestly, despite the fact that there's going to be, we're going to read you guys some predictions here, but despite the fact that there's going to be definitely some headwinds, overall, as crazy as it is, with double-digit employment, this is as pertains to housing, by the way, is what we're about to share with you guys, I really am optimistic about what's going to happen over the next few years, maybe because of all the headwinds that are being created, because the headwinds create opportunities for other businesses and entrepreneurs to evolve that never would have been able to before.
That's right. So, all of this gets to uncertainty and timing and how all of this will pan out. But if there's predictions, we have to remember also some trends that we were seeing pre-COVID. We were already extremely low inventory. According to NAR, we entered 2020 with a deficit of 1 million listings, 1 million active listings before things slowed down, which just makes sense that, as we get inventory in the market, you guys are mostly experiencing it burns off pretty quickly with multiple offers, of course, depending on price range and town and stuff like that.
We did do a podcast last week, and make sure you guys listen to it, where you can find all the hidden inventory. And we were out off, 9 or 10 places.
And if you're a Premier Coaching client, you've got coaching calls that go with that and an actual checklist, which I truly believe, Tim, the agents that are coming into this market, when they have coaching like that, where the question is, how do I find what my buyer is looking for? Okay, so if you got your license today and I said to you, here are the 9 or 10 different ways to find property, that agent is naturally going to be ahead of the agent who has been addicted to only the MLS for the past 20 years. It's actually the newer agents that are like, okay, yeah, well, you know what? Maybe I will look up some new construction. Maybe I will actually talk to a for sale by owner. They're more open to it.
Our podcast and our coaching business is, it's international. We've got people listening to us. We switched over to a new podcasting, I guess you'd call it, platform a few months ago, and the analytics we get are fascinating. But we have listeners in all, granted, it'll be 5 listeners in Iceland.
I know, it's crazy.
We'll have 5 people in Iceland downloading us, but we saw that we had a ton of people downloading us in the Middle East and Afghanistan. And I'm thinking to myself,
Israel, we've got at least 1 or 2 people in Israel.
I was like, why the heck would we have listeners in the Middle East? And I realized they're soldiers.
Yep.
That's what they
right.
are.
Well,
they're soldiers.
With some of them directly.
And they're guys that are in. So for those of you who are listening that are forward deployed, I appreciate and we sincerely respect and honor your service to our country. And we look forward to you returning stateside so we can help you start your real estate careers or continue your real estate careers. But as we have these conversations with people all over the planet, we get, people communicate through us, Facebook, or they'll text us or email us. The manner in which real estate is transacted globally is very similar to the United States, but it's also completely different. And the thing that's different is there's not an entitlement to a buyer's agent side commission. And that's something in the United States that is going to rock, I think, every single real estate brokerage an agent when they realize that the idea that you're just going to basically, casually work with real estate buyers occasionally, and you're going to be able to, automatically get paid a commission on a house that you introduced to them, which, by the way, they could have just found themselves and gone directly to the listing agent. And I know I'm crossing swords with a lot of you guys with regards to dual agency and buyer's agency and all the rest of it, but you ought to know that if there's a downward pressure on commissions going forward, which of course there will be, it's not going to come from the listing side. It's not going to come from
it comes from consumers. I had a case of that in coaching this week where, because this person was looking in a hot price range in a popular area, and the agent was very competent, busy listing agent, but could not jump immediately. That buyer client said, we have to move. We're just going to call the listing agent. That's our version right now of not expecting a buyer agent commission. The buyer will circumvent you. If that's okay. That is legal for them to do.
Also the thing I struggle with a lot, here's the mosquitoes right there. Oh, did you get it? Oh, it's over here now. Thanks. You sent them over to me. You know what? The size of this damn, I think this is what the alligator's been eating.
Could be.
Explain how big you got.
Tell you what.
This is what aggressive mosquito. You want to just break down and go get the off?
Yes.
All right.
Back to you.
Back to me. All right, go get the off before this thing gets us. Yeah. We're going to get him. Well, what were we just talking about? Now I've forgotten.
Buyer agency going
Oh, yeah. So I'll tell you guys, if you want to talk about, if you're buying your buyer leads, which a lot of you guys are, well, Julie and I are always looking for rental properties. We're looking right now in North Carolina. We're looking in Amelia Island, Florida. We're not in buying mode, but we're in watching mode because we're trying to understand those markets. And so Julie finds something in realtor.com, I think in North Carolina someplace. We want to buy some place that's going to be a VRBO that's up near the Smoky Mountains, some beautiful lake property, which, by the way, that area of the country, oh my gosh, if you guys live there, you're so lucky, so gorgeous. And we're headed there in October. So for those of you who live near Dragon's Tail, near I think it's Murphy, North Carolina, we're going to be there for 10 days enjoying the leaves and relaxing. So if you're in that area, if you want to stop by and have a cup of coffee with us, love to meet you. In any event, when you look at how a lot of these agents have basically, the buyer's agents that have come into the business, here's what we've discovered. A lot of agents have never developed any skill. And all these companies have emerged to basically tap into agent apathy. And for example, Julie was hitting realtor.com up for this listing, and you guys know about all this, and the listing, the person that called her back was somebody employed by realtor.com to call buyer leads back, try to pre-qualify the buyer lead, and then realtor.com then refers that buyer lead off to agents. And here's how convoluted that is. That Julie tried to get out of this realtor.com rep who the listing agent was. That mosquito is waited for you, and it's like flying right around your... Yeah. Yep. Did you get it?
I'm not sure. It's got friends.
No, you're just making it stronger. Hurry up. Oh, did you get it?
Yep.
All right.
But just as it
Julie, the mosquito killer. Well, so she goes checking on this property in North Carolina, and the agent, the person that called her back, wasn't a real estate licensee, so I don't even know if that's legal, by the way. And all this person was trying to do is basically, peel Julie out of determined motivation, just normal pre-qual stuff.
Yeah.
And Julie's like, look, are you the listing agent? No. Are you even an agent? No. So what are you trying to do? And the whole thing was just crazy because this was a no-skilled person who was trying to basically, how would you guys not call that baiting and switching? And that's the thing that always rubbed me the wrong way about how Realtor.com and Zillow, how they treated listing agents, how listing agents, succumbed to the pressure and the misinformation about having listings widely distributed through different portals. And so what you're going to start seeing is more low-skilled agents who've come into the business in the last really 14 years, who've never learned how to pre-qualify, who've never learned how to do anything other than buy their buyer leads. And now all of a sudden, and I pretty much can guarantee it's going to happen in earnest over the next 12 to 24 months, you're going to start seeing that listing agents and sellers are going to start saying, you know what? I don't want to just basically set aside 2.5 or 3% of every transaction for a buyer agent. who is in essence negotiating on behalf of my, competition.
Negotiating against you.
Why am I paying that person to negotiate against me and take money out of my pocket? And that they're representing the buyer. They should pay their own representation. I'm not paying it anymore. And if that buyer, and then what's that going to do? It's going to make it so that agents who've only learned or never really learned, but only have been working with buyers, are now going to start having to explain to the buyer why that they're worth, 2.5% or 3% of the transaction. That's never going to happen. So these agents that have never learned how to pre-qualify, never learned how to basically generate their own leads, never really learned how to do anything in the past, maybe 13, 14 years. And now they're going to be somehow put in a position where they're supposed to convince a buyer why they're worth potentially tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of a transaction just for doing what that buyer could do themselves, watch the virtual tour, call the listing agent, the whole thing. And that's the way, by the way, real estate's done in the rest of the world. That was my closing of that loop. Only in Canada and maybe partially in some other parts of Europe do you see this buyer agent commission thing being an entitlement to the transaction. Normally, then there's no organized sharing of listings either. And so what these technology companies have done essentially is they obviously rode in on their white horse and presented themselves as being the savior to the consumer in the evil real estate industry, which was trying to hoard all the information and try to make it so that, consumers were relying on second and third hand information. You can't trust the agents, but you can trust these tech companies. You guys, if you've been alive long enough, that's their usual pitch. There's some sort of what would be the word even? Advocates or activists on behalf of consumers. It's all a bunch of malarkey.
That's not how my call went.
And all I
asked for was pictures.
Right. And all they try to do is they just try to get between you and your customer. That's what these companies are all trying to do. Just lead generate. That's it. So, yeah, we're going to see a big sea change in how buyer agency is handled. And we're going to see a bunch of agents who've never learned skills are going to be on their heels because guess what? They're not going to be able to sell to the buyer why they're worth, paying anything to. And that's what's going to unfortunately happen. And a lot of brokerages who are experiencing a lot of downward pressure on commissions, what happens if your buyer agent commissions completely get washed out over the next, say, 2 or 3 years? Or at least the buyer agent commissions go down dramatically. And that's what happens in the rest of the world. When you're in Australia, their sales process is usually auction-based, but you pay the seller side of the commission. And if there's a buyer agent that brings a buyer, and they want their commission paid, it goes on top of the sale price. Mm-hmm. The buyer can finance their own buyer agent commission, and they can do that in the United States too. But again, it's going to go back to skills. So this transitional period is going to create again a lot of headwinds for a lot of low skilled people in general, not just in real estate. So you can't just basically be on, quarantine hideout. You can't just wait for things to return to normal because by the time you realize that you waited too long, you're going to peep your head back out of your cave and you're going to realize that nothing is the same. And it's going to be so bizarre for so many people that this is going to be for a lot of people the big emotional checkout, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, you got to get your skills on. I mean, look at all the other areas where you have got your skills on, like how many of us had never been on a Zoom call before, but now if you want to, educate your child or do a listing presentation or do virtually anything, you're going to have to figure some of that out. The people that hide out are going to be left behind, left in the dust. So,
but think about what you just said. Think about how fascinating that is. Mm-hmm. So reciprocity, right?
Right.
So you have a Texas agent's license.
Mm-hmm.
what states does reciprocity
I don't
for
think
Texas?
Texas has very many at all.
I don't think they do either.
I don't think so.
But I know like Puerto Rico, they have reciprocity.
With like Arkansas and West Virginia or something like that.
Wasn't it Georgia too or something crazy?
Yeah, I think Georgia also. Yeah, because I was thinking about Colorado.
Well, if I'm in Puerto Rico and I want to start doing business in on the listing side of things, and I can basically operate digitally, what would prevent me from starting to call, for example, or essentially solicit expired or for sale by owners in those particular markets if the new normal, and I'm going way ahead of my skis here, but just think big, guys.
It's possible.
Yeah, you could start doing all the expectation, or it's now normal to basically have your agents doing presentations over Zoom. Nothing is really done in person, and in person becomes the exception to the rule. And that's just the new normal, right? And that means that if you're living in, wherever you're living, you could have multiple states or have reciprocity with another state, and you could start transacting in other states and have absolutely no barriers to entry because all the, the normalcy of essentially thinking that someone has to be local is completely gone.
I know. I've always had this concept
possible.
of like a nationally based price reduction company where you could charge agents to get their listings priced right. do it for them.
We
There's
totally
there's
can
all
do
kinds
that.
of
I know.
opportunity there.
Well, we're working on starting or restarting a national real estate team. Tim and Julie Harris's, Harris Homes and Estates. We're going to do it too. So what we're going to do is we're going to start a national, because we're with EXP and EXP is licensed in all 50 states. So why don't we start a national real estate team? Why don't we basically? Well, we are. There's not even a question. The questions are also already been answered. We're going to announce that sometime soon. But we're going to offer you guys the opportunity to work with Julie and I as part of our EXP real estate team, and we're going to provide you all the the support that you'd normally get, plus a whole bunch as you guys would come to expect from us. All the coaching and the training, but we're going to give you access to referrals and to leads and all that, and we're going to be able to do it in all 50 states. How cool is that? So with just essentially inside probably 30 days, maybe 2 weeks, we're going to have our own national real estate team again. But you guys can do the same thing if you're associated with a company like not a company. There is only one company that you can do that with, which would be eXp Realty. You can start your own national real estate, team, let's call it that, with no barriers to entry in essence. Basically, your ability to disseminate information and get people interested in joining your team and offering a unique set of values that would want them to be part of your group. That's an amazing thing that only is possible because of how fast things have changed with regards to the adaptation to technology. And I'm really excited about that. I think that's going to be amazing.
Totally.
All right, so Julie, let's talk about, I sent you some notes with regards to real estate stuff.
Well, so things that we talk about, but also to keep an eye on them and have been proven thus far, is that, for example, working from home, as we talked about, is no longer stigmatized. Video conferencing is acceptable. This is already affecting where people choose to live. Okay, so before, we all knew that the trend was to move into the city, deal with getting a smaller place for more money, not deal with traffic. But now people are looking for quality of life in the suburbs or beyond the suburbs.
Take a pause. I'm going to share with you. I didn't send this article to you.
Okay.
So there was another article that was equally as fascinating, but it was a little bit too doomy and gloomy for even me. It was just depressing. But they were talking about what's going to happen to these urban areas. Like, look at New York City, right? You have, 13,000 vacant apartments.
Yeah, that's as of now, and that's without the foreclosure or the eviction moratorium running out.
Right.
Imagine after that.
And look at in what's Madison Avenue in New York City? All those retailers, they're out of business that are never coming back.
Lowest cost for retail space in the history of recent times in New York City. I forget it's like $700 a square foot or something.
And then you think to yourself, well, what caused that momentum to change? Nothing that's even remotely on the radar anywhere. So if you're living in a densely urban area like that, the coronavirus, I think, has created an excuse for people to essentially move the hell out of the city and get away from the taxes. But you're going to have these cities now that are all their future planning and all their expenses, everything that, for example, New York City has to spend money on to keep New York City, that it's based on people consuming things and property taxes and that type of expense. Well, if people are leaving and they're not spending money in the city like they were before, what's going to happen to the city itself? And this is
massive commercial vacancy as well, not even just residential.
And this is what that article that I didn't share with you was talking about, is in these densely populated urban areas that have been essentially the hubs for commerce and technology. They're all going to go through this metamorphosis into something that's truly undefined. And we've seen that happen in the history of the United States before. It happened in Detroit.
Yes. Well, and it takes a long time to convert, and it really, all of these conversations get back to supply and demand, and what is the demand for, right? So in Detroit, for example, houses got to be so inexpensive, cheap, for practically free.
If you guys have never been to Detroit,
like real Detroit,
if you've never been to real Detroit, you will be shocked, because Detroit, there was this beautiful. Detroit for a long time was one of the sort of industrial hubs of planet Earth, right? Because of making cars and all the businesses that were associated with making cars. It was really it was the best of what the United States had to offer. And then for a whole bunch of reasons, generations, fast forward generations, and then Detroit on itself is now largely a ghost town. And you drive through Detroit, which we did because we used to go to the Detroit Auto Show every year, and I think it was January or whatever. And you drive up through Detroit, it is bombed out in the literal sense. It looks like
Yep.
something from a movie. Matter of fact, they actually, when you guys see those dystopian movie scenes where they're showing essentially bombed
Wanted to
out
choose
cities and
from there.
whatnot, that's where they film them. They film them in Detroit. It is so sad and depressing that you just can't even put words
Now,
to it.
there are some lovely suburbs surrounding it, right? And the same with Baltimore. And I was reading Buffalo, New York for a long time was like a really hip, fascinating, interesting place when they were in charge of all the Great Lakes, commerce and stuff like that.
It's
so,
the pendulum thing.
But
That's
what
what we're talking
happens
about.
to
Right.
those areas, right? And it doesn't happen like next year. It has to go through a really horrible cycle. And now in little, areas of Detroit, those houses that sell for like $5,000, $15,000 a pop, those are becoming like art studios.
Yeah,
and
but they're still not
things like
selling
that.
it.
But they're not selling like they
there's no-
used to, right?
there's
They're
no
not.
ta-
There's no coming back. from
There's
that.
no tax basis there.
No.
And so there's no coming back. And the world has moved on.
Some of them don't even have utilities.
Right.
Those neighborhoods got letters in the mail saying 2 weeks from now you will no longer have police coverage,
Right.
and 4 weeks from now you also won't have water.
What was I don't remember the legal term, but literally there were cities in Detroit where the Detroit, government in essence said, we're no longer going to be servicing that part of Detroit.
Yeah, you're on your own.
Right. There's no fire service there, no utilities there that we're going to worry about, nothing. It's no man's land. And that happened. And guess
Put
what?
that in a home brochure.
But that is starting to happen in other parts. And we're not talking about defund the police. We're not talking
No,
about stuff like
it's not
that. We're
that.
talking about the effects of long-term shifts in essentially where people want to live, how they want to live.
Especially in the big urban environments.
Yeah.
That is not speculation anymore. We have real numbers on that. And there's all kinds of people reporting the instances of searching for, minimum of 1 acre, minimum of 5 acres. There's up like 2,000%.
People want to politicize this, and it's not political. What this is, it's economic. If there were viable jobs there and people could have quality lifestyles there and the whole thing, people would move back in a heartbeat. But what you're seeing now, and that's what the migration patterns of the United States have typically followed, right? I mean, if you guys go all the way back to, agriculture, right? Most Americans for the longest time worked on farms or farm-related businesses, and then all of a sudden people started moving to the cities to get jobs, and that's what happened in China. That's that's the typical pattern, right? So you go from an agricultural-based, subsistence type economy that's based on people, basically growing things, and then you move to a service based business or an industrial type thing where they're making things that are to support you guys understand what I'm saying, right? And so you see the birth of these mega cities, especially China's the best example. It's insane, though that's partially fueled by, a lot of government money and all the rest of it. But that aside, what happens when people no longer have to work in the cities and no longer have to live in those dense areas with all the compromises? What happens to those cities? People seem to want to get the hell out. That's what, and they don't go back. And that's what a lot of people are worried that's going to happen to a lot of these cities. That a lot of parts of the cities, and remember, guys, it's going to be bifurcated, right? You'll have certain parts of the city where Julie and I are from in Columbus, Ohio. You had this beautiful area, it's still beautiful, called German Village, and then literally 2 or 3 streets from German Village, you had this other area. Wasn't it called Hungarian Village or something crazy?
That's nearby, yeah, and. I can't remember the other little sister community. There was like, if you cross this street, you are now outside of German Village.
But German Village was this tiny little area.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was founded and built up by Germans that came, immigrated from wherever. So, moral of the story is that's the bifurcation you're going to see in these cities.
So you have I think there's 2 levels of your word bifurcation. There's city versus suburb versus country. And then you have within the city, you have little pockets that have lots of enthusiasm behind them, and people are very protective of that. And, they will survive and perhaps thrive. But possibly right next door, and this is why you guys have to, really pay attention to what you're doing, because it's not going to be the same citywide. You might have something that, has 1,000 days on the market or something like that. I'll tell you, one of the other things that I'm seeing with some of our coaching calls is people, it's not just suburban, it's even beyond that. So places that were like 3rd tier, you'd never even consider that in your search. People are finding like, all right, so I found this kind of okay house, but it's got 100 acres. How do I subdivide that into being able to have 5 houses for the rest of my family? Or maybe I can build a homeschool pod on that land. We didn't get questions like that before.
Nope.
It was, how can I move into the city and still afford it?
Yeah. Exactly.
It's totally
and,
different
And
now.
then, like, if they're moving, and for the longest time, Julian, we still do have, I don't even know how many coaching clients and podcast listeners in Manhattan.
Yep.
Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. I don't know. And, the reality of it is that I'm worried about you guys. I really am. And you all have to start thinking in terms of whether or not your market, as it's been, is going to be the market that you want to be part of going forward. And this goes to like all these sort of institutionalized beliefs about our industry in particular. And you have those bullet points from that.
Yeah, they're right in front of me.
You don't have to if you don't want to. It's up to you.
I had a few. We were talking about one of them. It comes down to the trajectory of the inventory and what happens with interest rates. So a lot of the predictions are it's going to be fast and furious for the most part, with exceptions like we're talking about Manhattan and Detroit and Miami condo market and stuff like that, until after the election, right? Because nobody wants it to hit the fan. Nobody wants to take away some of the stimulus. After the election, things may start to settle down pricing wise, and inventory may rise. That's going to be the story, is what happens with inventory. And if inventory were to rise at the same time as interest rates going up, that can settle some of the demand down, and then things would normalize a bit. But we've got a lot of economic indicators saying that interest rates might actually go down even next year. So I think that's the thing to watch, is which direction does it go?
The article that you were referencing was from Forbes, and it was written by a guy that basically was a real estate investor, right? In essence, that's
and
what he
had
does.
lots of different. They had like.
And he made his money by buying distressed real estate.
That's right.
So he has confirmation bias.
Of course,
right?
Yeah.
And look, we have no bias one way or the other. I mean, whether
we have agent bias, we want you all to be successful.
Exactly, that's what our bias is. But he was kind of believing that there was going to be a big return to distressed real estate, and I'll give you our opinion too. If there is, we're going to prepare you guys. You guys are going to be short sale, drilled down, REO, everything we can possibly cram into your heads. You're gonna learn. And we're going to do it fast, and we're going to do it better than anyone else, as we always have.
Already ready to rumble.
Yeah, that's right. We've already got it ready to rumble. Literally.
Well, and this is one of the reasons we kept our BPO cash flow.
But we don't
alive.
think it's going to happen.
Yep.
Right. That's what we're trying to explain to you guys. Now, 90 days ago, we did think it was going to happen, but now we don't think it's going to happen. And some people are theorizing that after the election, all this stimulus and all this government intervention is going to go away. No, it's not. It's never going to go away. I really don't think it's ever going to go away.
No, I don't think so either. And he talks about that a little bit, especially if the president changes, because the new guy in town might have more pressure to, now do something about the economy. Do you think they're going to let things hit the fan then?
What
No.
they're going to do about the economy, what does that even mean? What they're going to do about the economy is they're just going to print more money.
Right, exactly, because that has been proven to keep things alive.
Right, exactly.
And nobody wants, the drama of being the person that was in office when it started to decline.
You tell me
None of those things will go away.
You tell me the president or any sort of politician that's going to preach austerity, right?
No.
Who's going to try to take the punch bowl away? You tell me how that person doesn't get lynched.
Gonna happen.
It ain't going to happen.
Nope.
And
especially
now,
with everything else going on at the
Right.
same time. You've got social unrest. You've got the virus still around. You have all these things, that if we had one thing to deal with, I think maybe they'd jigger with it a little bit more and see what they could slow down or speed up. But there's so many things happening. The collective unconscious, I don't think, wants any of that to come unglued or unravel.
do you guys remember, some of you will, most of you hopefully, if you were born more than 30 seconds ago, you'll remember, back when the economy crashed in 07, 08, there was all this huge amount of political turmoil about the stimulus bill. And it was Congress. It was less than $1 trillion. It was like $863 billion. And this was supposed to be the Hail Mary pass. It was going to turn everything around and all the rest of it. $863 billion or whatever it was. Congress didn't pass it, and all these Congress people were saying, we can't do this because what's going to do, it's going to create essentially a precedent where the government's going to bail out businesses, where it's never going to end, that there's going to be continual handouts forever. It's going to totally, completely change the face of the economy and how we interact with each other and blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, they were all right, because that's exactly what's happened. And just to put this in perspective, you guys Google this yourselves. That was $863 billion. This go-around, since February, between the money that's come out through the CARES Act and extended unemployment and the SBA, loans and just all the things that we know about, and the money that the Fed's been spending to keep the stock market and the interest rates low and keep the bond market, all these things viable, trillions of dollars. One estimate was $18 trillion, okay?
It was almost the same as the GDP, wasn't it?
The GDP is $21.6 trillion
it's
per
close to
year,
that.
right? And so the total value of all the goods and services sold in the United States in a year is 21.6 trillion, might be 22.6, I don't remember, but I think it's $21.6 trillion. And the amount of money that's been injected to the economy in how many months?
I don't know, probably 8.
18 trillion,
Yeah.
8, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, 7. Almost 8, right? Is almost the same as a whole year's worth of...
and we're not through the year.
Yeah, and so what's happened to all that money, right? What's happened to it? It doesn't just go away. It got spent. It's getting spent. It's going from one hand to the other. It's just going from different hands than it did before. This has never happened before, where there's been this much money injected into the economy. Again, I mean, we talked about this a while ago, but that's the reason you see gold and you see the stock market and you see other asset prices going up. So I did have somebody ask me, who asked me, Michael Gordon, he's the number 5, him and his wife, they're going to do $200 million in real estate transactional income. Long time coaching clients. They're number 5 at Berkshire Hathaway. I was talking to him yesterday, and he asked me what I thought was going to happen next year, and I think he was surprised by my answer. And my answer is essentially what we've been talking about. I think that there's going to be what's going to feel like a really bizarre boom in the economy that's 100% predicated on the government continuing to spend money. I think you're going to have an increase in the amount of money that's being spent, and the increase in the amount of money that's being spent on differing things, no matter who gets elected.
I think
Honestly.
you're right. Yep.
Trump, like before you'd say when you and I were growing up, conservative, people pull themselves up the bootstraps and all these sort of conservative values that we're all very comfortable with or,
At least familiar with.
At least familiar with. That's a better way of saying it. And now it's like the Democrats and the Republicans are all kind of preaching from the same side of the pulpit, They're all saying and doing the same exact thing. So there is no plan B. There is no Ron Paul that's going to say austerity and people need to stop spending money and we need to. Ain't going to happen. There'll be people
There's
that say
no support for that.
None. Not now. Maybe 10
That's
years
not
from
any
now.
fun.
Right, exactly.
Who's going to do that in a global pandemic and with murder hornets around?
Yeah.
Okay, let's just do austerity now too. No.
And guys, the thing to watch out for is whether there's a viable alternative to the U.S. dollar. Because in our opinion, and based on a lot of smart people we talk to and listen to, that's the only thing that's really going to derail the ability of the country to continue to basically be artificially inflated until the cows come home. Yeah. And by the way, the cows are probably never coming home. No, and even then, here's another thing that's kind of interesting. I know, Julian, are so boring for some of you guys because you don't care about any of this, but you should. Is guess what country on planet Earth has the largest gold reserves? You guys want to guess? You want me to put up the clock? Do you know?
I would imagine it's us.
Yeah, it's the United States. So the United States has the largest gold reserves of any country in the world. So we have trillions and trillions of dollars of gold. So you want a prediction from your husband? Okay, here it is. I do think there's going to be a reckoning for the U.S. dollar and our ability to print money. I do think the other countries that are essentially, using the U.S. dollar as their backbone to their economies, they're going to get weary of the inflation that's going to come as a result of the money printing. They too are going to realize that in their countries, they're not the value of their dollars that they've been using for trade is going to go down. And guys, literally most of the world uses the U.S. dollar, and there really is no Deutschmark anymore. They're on the euro, right? But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Like in Europe, you go from one country to the other in Europe, and you're all using the euro. Well, lots of parts of the planet Earth they use, like in the Middle East, guys, they use the U.S. dollar. It's called the petrodollar, because all the accounts at the end of the day for all the oil and gas trading that goes around planet Earth is settled through the U.S. Treasury in dollars. So we have hegemony. I always struggle with that word. Thank you. That has never been experienced by anything in any country ever. Well, okay, so eventually what's going to happen is people are going to start saying, when the Treasury continues to print money, what that is doing is it's a tax, in essence, on the money that you have, because it's making the value of the money that you have go down in buying power. Okay, does that make sense? It happens, generally speaking, it happens subtly, and in real estate, which is amazing, because you're selling assets that are also increasing in price, you're not really experiencing the downside of inflation. You might notice it that your milk now costs $10 a gallon, whereas you remember not too distant past it was $5 a gallon. But your income has kept pace because you were smart enough to have a real estate license, and the real estate you're selling has also inflated.
Which
now,
means your commission went right up with it.
That's right. Now, if you're a normal Joe and Josephine and you're not in something that is inflating to keep up with the cost of things, then you're going to suffer. And that is what's going to happen, and that's what happens in inflation. That's the reason inflation ultimately hurts the masses, because they don't have an ability to basically buy the normal things that they would be buying. But what will happen eventually is the world will get sick of essentially the U.S. Treasury and the U.S. taking advantage of the position that they have as the global reserve currency. And there's going to be all kinds of who knows what, could even be military or political unrest, could be all kinds of different things. You're going to hear rumblings of different countries who are going to start saying, we no longer have faith and confidence in the U.S. dollar. It's already happening. You'll start hearing it happen more in the next probably 5 to 10 years. And then, in my opinion, mark this down, put it in your calendar, U.S. is going to say, okay, you're right. We didn't handle our position as it being the global reserve currency the way it should have been. And we did print too many dollars, and it has created this huge global financial problem. So we're going to come out with a new U.S. dollar, and guess what? This one's going to be backed by gold. And the benefit of being backed by gold is that they can only issue so much money as commensurate with the amount of gold that they have, which means that the U.S. government, everything will change geopolitically, but it'll mean in essence we can't just continue to print money willy-nilly with no strings attached, which is what we're doing now. Does this make sense?
It does. I think it'd be a pretty radical move, but it's all very logical too.
Yeah. So if you were, I would, if I were you guys and I was listening to all this, again, you need to start thinking in terms of how you want your lives to be 10 years from now or 15 years from now. And look what the smartest people on planet Earth are doing. Warren Buffett is buying gold. He bought Barrick gold miners. People are going to start looking at ways of hedging future risk.
And that's not something you want to wait on, because
no, it gets too expensive.
It gets really expensive really fast.
But look, obviously we like to talk about EXP Royalty because we're like the ultimate enthusiasts.
Well, another example of something not to wait on. I mean, come on.
Totally. I mean, it's insane.
Right?
Look, EXP Realty is going to be, in our opinion, and I really cannot find and I think about it too, and I intellectualize about this, and I talk to other really smart people about this. I cannot see how EXP Realty won't become the largest real estate brokerage in the world. Really, they've got
fast becoming.
Yeah.
I mean, you can just look at the chart. Everybody, you guys can all look it up. You can see it's already happening.
When I'm talking to some of these massive, like I was just telling you about the number 5 Berkshire guys who are going to do $200 million, and they have. Can you imagine all the options they have and all the people that are breathing down their making them offers? And I'm not saying the Gordons in general, but just people in general. They're looking at what EXP has done in the last 10 years, but specifically what it's doing now, the way they're implementing and the rate in which they're implementing. They're looking at what the stock value is doing. We're not stock analysts or chartists or anything like that, but I know in February it was $8, and I know last week on Friday it closed at $40. And I know that pretty much the global financial press is now seeing that EXP Realty is sort of almost inevitably going to become the dominant player for real estate brokerage on planet Earth. That's kind of an amazing thing. And I find that incredibly exciting. The analogy of Amazon, I don't think that's overstated, really. I don't. The analogy of other things that have started out as sort of, it's a kind of a weird idea. We don't get it. It's virtual. How can you be virtual? And then all of a sudden, it's moved past those initial phases of, just the early adapters and all that. And now you have the most pedigreed agents in the United States. And now EXP has expanded beyond the United States to 6 different countries. They're going to obviously continue to expand all over the planet. They've got this really, I think, fantastic executives in place to make the company go international at an increasing rate. But you're going to see EXP probably have over 40,000 agents this year, and who knows, by the end of 2021, maybe over 100,000 agents. So you're seeing something that, other than tech companies, which is what EXP essentially is becoming, right? You're seeing essentially a convergence of things that could only happen because of the coronavirus, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we do talk about this, but it's so true. EXP was born online. It didn't become online.
It was born in a crisis.
It didn't, right. And it was born in a crisis, right? It didn't have to sort of, retrofit itself into the new reality. It already was there. almost like it was waiting for something like this to happen to thrive, because all of those things are. I kind of think of it as like what is it? The lodgepole pine.
Tell the
the
story. It's a
seed,
great
right?
one.
So there's the lodgepole pines are those big tall pine trees that they make lodge poles out of, and telephone poles. The engineers like them because they're so straight and strong. Well, there's a breed of those that only can grow once they've been singed in a wildfire.
You mean
right?
the seeds?
The seeds can only emerge when they've actually, and why is that? Because the outer crust, the seed has a resin around it. And, when it falls to the ground, it can't just plant itself because the resin's too tough for it to actually get its roots through until a crisis, like a massive wildfire, releases that. So it's not just one crisis, but it's, a decade ago crisis where this started. And, Glenn had the brilliant idea to say, you know what, let's just make this thing completely different so that it is, it's not just online, but all of your resources are right there. You can do everything that you need to do in real estate from your desk.
Well, you
from
mentioned
your car,
you mentioned
your
Glenn.
phone. Yeah.
You mentioned Glenn Sanford,
Yeah.
right? He's
I
the
mean-
founder of EXP. This was his idea. But if you look at, for example, and he's now become a billionaire because of it, right?
Yeah.
In 10 years.
Talk about things happening very quickly.
Right. He goes from basically making a video back in 2007 talking about how he was on his heels financially. It may have been 2006, and how his goal was to create this company that would be virtual. And then he goes on to say how he wants to create agent millionaires, how he wants to make agents owners of the company and share in the revenue. And he was way, way early for his idea and his concept. People sort of like questioned it. The old guard, bricks and mortar, oh, that'll never happen. Real estate is all local and blah, blah, blah. And then look what happened. And look what's happening. And that's the reason that we have some of the biggest real estate brokers and the biggest teams that are contacting us saying, all right, let's drill down. Let's really look at what this EXP thing is all about. Guys, it's not just a real estate brokerage. It is a real estate brokerage in the sense that basically EXP offers whatever the best real estate brokerages in the country offer. In many cases, much, much better. So the services that an agent receives at EXP exceed usually the best brokerages out there. But the way that they've created this business is agents are literally owners in the company. Agents are awarded stock for selling houses, for sponsoring people when they sell their first house. You can buy the stock at a discount. EXP has created an alternative path forward for, now tens of thousands, but soon millions of agents. So they don't just have to grow old in obscurity. They can actually build wealth and sell real estate at the same time.
Yes.
These are the types of situations economically that are usually only reserved for people that basically were born under a lucky star, own franchises, own regions, knew the right people at the right time. The wealth that's being accumulated amongst the tens of thousands of agents was usually just hoarded by the handful of people that were in the right place at the right time during the formation of said franchise or whatnot.
Yeah, the really cool thing is that this is very consistent in terms of like, what is the quintessential agent struggle? They sell a bunch of real estate, they freak out and keep it all in contract. The next month they're half starving to death because they didn't do any prospecting or lead follow-up or anything because they're keeping their deals together. And they wonder, how in the world am I going to iron out the feast and famine? Even the best agents, I would say almost especially the best agents because they know how to list and sell quickly, they all suffer from that. And EXP allows for an additional spoke of income, okay, that is extremely consistent month in and month out. And what really hit me, Tim, was the first time.
It's not a spoke, it's multiple spokes.
Well, that's true.
Multiple
but
income
the consistency
sources.
of it,
Right.
right? So what really struck me was the first time we went to an EXP event, and agents were talking about their profit share coming to them in terms of
It's not profit share, it's revenue share.
Revenue share that came to them month in and month out, right? That even a difference of a consistent $5,000, $7,500, right?
Even $1,000.
Even $1,000. I mean, like, what does it take on a normal deal to be able to save $1,000? You got to pay your taxes, you got to pay your fees, you got to pay for the cost of doing business.
But think about
and maybe
this.
you'll end up with $1,000.
We have dozens of rental properties.
That's even worse.
And for us to make $1,000 off a rental property, the property is worth probably 180, maybe 200. Well, we have rental properties now that we only net $1,000 off each rental property, and they're worth
Paid off,
right? No
Agreed.
mortgages, and we only net $1,000, and they're worth like $250,000, right?
Nuts.
So for you guys to make $1,000 off a rental property, you'd have to basically pay it off. You'd then have to, deal with all the Mickey
Service
Mouse
it.
of being a tenant or being a landlord, and then you get $1,000. Or you could just join EXP and sponsor a few people, and then you can.
And literally, I want to be clear about this because some of them think that, well, I don't want to be a recruiting machine. I can't see having any time to do that. literally sponsor a few people, and you can have. I mean, if you want to start with just $1,000 a month, what would you guys do if you had a predictable $12,000 more, not just this year, but next year and the year after,
Right.
and the year after
Well,
that?
it grows.
You know,
It grows. It won't just stay the same.
and
It'll
it grows
grow.
exactly.
Because people add people and add people.
And I just remember being that at that event that was someplace south of Austin, and seeing agent after agent just tell their little 5-minute success story, right? And the impact that it had to them and their family, and how they, they were talking about
Let me give some
sleeping
real
well at night.
examples.
Yeah,
Let me give some
yeah.
real. I know people that have joined EXP in the last, let's say, 12 months.
Yeah.
And have personally sponsored, recruited, if you want to call it that, maybe 12, 15 people.
Mm-hmm.
And their overall groups are 75 people, 60 people, 100 people. In other words, they're getting paid every time any of those people sell anything. And they've only personally sponsored maybe a dozen people or 15 people. I know people that have, at least 5 people, okay, that have less than, and they've been with EXP for maybe 4 or 5 years. And they just are not into the sponsoring. And so they've only sponsored maybe 10 people or 15 people ever.
Many of whom probably came to them on their own.
Right, exactly. Through real estate transactions, telling me about EXP, or maybe it was their mom from, is retired in Florida that has a real estate license. But I know some of these people that have thousands of people in their groups because the groups have just, I don't want to say they've grown organically because they haven't, but they have. I mean, essentially they've been in the right place, and they've been, and peak, because everyone is wondering about EXP. And so these are agents that they've created passive income from themselves from the revenue share, essentially because they've told a handful of people about it, and then those people told a handful of people, and those people told a handful of people. And then the system, because EXP is growing so fast, that's the opportunity that all of you guys have right now if you're going to take it seriously. And if you are at all financially, unstable or worried about what the future is going to hold, wouldn't it be nice to have multiple sources of income, especially multiple sources of income that really have no trailing liability with them?
That's the best part, right?
I know somebody who joined EXP. I don't want to give names, but I do know his numbers because he told me. He's now got, I'll give you his initials.
Okay.
SK. You know who it is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
Yes.
he's got, as of last week, he has 200 people in his group.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I know what the 200 people, I know what he's making. He's making between $10,000 and $20,000 a month. Okay. And he's personally sponsored, I think, something like, maybe 25 people. Something like that.
Yeah.
And that's how big his group has grown in that amount of time.
Amazing.
Because people are talking to people, and then they're joining. And it's what's really amazing is, that's enough money for him to pay all of his personal bills.
Yep.
But then his group on a whole, this guy in particular, his group on a whole is growing by over 20% per month.
Mm-hmm.
So his 100 people, it grew by 20%, It's growing that fast. Now, it's not going to, maybe that happens for 2 or 3 months and then it settles down. Maybe one of the people that he sponsors a team or a brokerage, and then in comes 30 people or whatever. But generally speaking, historically, I mean, we don't, his group's grown by probably about 10% per month.
Mm-hmm.
So he's at 200 people.
Mm-hmm.
If his group grows by 10% per month, then he's going to be at, 200 plus 10%. And then it compounds monthly. So then he's going to be at 220, and then it's going to grow by 10%. And maybe 1 month it's 6%, 1 month it's 14%. But then let's say the end of this year, he's going to have 300 people in his group. Mm-hmm. By the end of the following year, his group will probably grow with not a lot of intervention on his part to probably, I would guess, 500, maybe 600 people.
It's amazing.
It is amazing.
And
and he gets
and
revenue
he's not
share.
talking to all 500 individually.
No,
That's
of course
the point.
not. And he gets revenue share on all those people.
Yep.
There's no servicing of those people. The XP does it for him. He doesn't have to answer their questions. He's not coaching and training. He's not their broker. He's not worrying about their errors and omissions insurance. Nope. He's not, helping them with their marketing or pricing or dealing with their cranky customers or worried about it. He's just getting revenue share.
Yes.
Because of the fact that he introduced a handful of people that introduced a handful of people that introduced. That is incredible.
Right. And, it does continue to grow that way because of the enthusiasm for it. I guess that's one of the things I've been pleasantly surprised about. Before we, were affiliated with EXP, we really, we were kind of broker agnostic as long as you were happy there and, it was a decent location and you were getting paid on time, then that's fine. Okay, but so that was kind of like a neutral broker approach, right? Now, seeing how agents and brokers are with each other in EXP, it really is, I don't want to get all wishy-washy sounding, but it is more like a family type. Everybody helps everybody out because you're all benefiting.
Well, we're all benefiting from the share value.
Exactly.
We're all benefiting as the
so
company
you
grows
call each
bigger.
other back. You answer
know.
questions.
It's
You
true.
support each other. You talk about all the different benefits and how to understand them. There's, weekly calls. You can be as involved or as uninvolved as you want to be. You can just, do your deals.
You don't have to you don't have to participate in
No.
revenue share. You don't have to sponsor agents or do anything. You can just basically be on the real estate
Sure.
side, still kick-ass brokerage.
You gotta hang your hat somewhere, right?
The cap is only $16,000 a year. If you have a team, you're a brokerage. Those caps are obviously less. But you could benefit from basically being an owner in one of the, if not the fastest growing real estate company in the history of real estate, right? Because of the fact that you'll be able to buy the stock at a discount, you'll be awarded shares in the company when you just do normal transactions and all the rest of it. You'll be given shares in the company just from doing what you're already doing, and the shares in the company. And here's the other thing. I'd say in the last 30 days, not even 30 days, EXP as a company has, I think, taken the next leg up in terms of becoming closer to having a tech company valuation. It was mentioned on CNBC. If you Google EXPI, which is the ticker symbol, if you just put that into Google, the financial press from around the planet is talking about EXPI as an investment. It's gone from something that people thought, well, it's a real estate company and who knows what they do. And now people are saying, this is a runner. This is something like we've not seen before. This company is growing at such a rate, and this company is profitable. I mean, Glenn and the executives at the company are running a profitable real estate company that is never at a scale with tens of thousands of agents that's never been done before. All the while, Glenn is fulfilling his promise and his commitment, and he's making agent millionaires. And it's real. It's not fake. And I know some of you guys are skeptics, and I get it because it almost seems like it's too good to be true. And that's probably what we felt like for the longest time before we aligned with EXP. Almost 2 years ago, we thought it was too good to be true. And the one regret I have and Julie has is we didn't move faster.
Yeah.
We didn't do it quick enough. And now we see the momentum the company's building, the quality of the people that they're attracting. EXP in the next 12 months is going to start attracting some of the biggest names in real estate. And when that starts to happen, and all of you who are skeptics, who are waiting on the sidelines for somebody to tap you on your shoulder and say, now it's time to take a hard look at EXP, in some cases you will have waited too long because a lot of those agents that moved in the markets before you, they're going to have relationships and conversations going with all the best agents in your marketplace about joining EXP, and then you're going to have to just fight for the crumbs. Look, I'm not being scarcity minded. I'm just stating a fact. In some of these densely populated areas where there's a lot of EXP agents, it is competitive to try to find an agent to sponsor if that's what you want to do. So you really need to take this seriously and this opportunity seriously, and do it now because there's some breathing room while the government is, essentially inflating the economy while they're printing trillions of dollars. We do all have this sort of reprieve from normalcy. Where we don't have to experience the downsides of what's actually going to inevitably happen in the economy. But before it does, you definitely want to diversify your sources of income. So I had somebody else ask me, Julie, what would cause EXP to go on its heels? And they're looking for reasons why it might fail. I couldn't find one, honestly.
Not with this kind of momentum.
No, it can't. So. And what's more is I think if these worst case scenarios play out over the next however many years, EXP is going to be in the position like no other company because their cost structure is all virtual, because they're going to be diversified with agents all over the country in every market. And as we've been trying to make clear to all of our podcast listeners and coaching clients, there is no one market. So there might be EXP agents in one part of the country that are not doing well, but in other parts of the country they're going to be doing well. Oh, that not good enough? Well, now we're expanding into different parts of the world and different countries.
Yes, and it's agent owned, so there's control, right? You guys know what's going on at all times. There's so much enthusiasm for it. I think if it was something that, like you could poke some holes in it and it just sounded kind of like, maybe, but there's so much good and so much enthusiasm and just the impetus behind it and expanding to other countries. I don't know. I mean,
it's exciting.
It's a great question, but I don't see any reason that it would have problems like that.
And we honestly, Julie, I know if I say, I know Gene is listening, and if I say lucky, if we're so lucky, Gene's going to text me and say, don't tell yourself you're lucky. You're,
we're
doing
blessed.
Right. We're blessed. We're going to say we're blessed, but we do feel we're blessed. We feel that we have found what will be, I think, the perfect extension for what our life mission has been with our coaching company and our books and all of our podcasts and all of our coaching calls and all the things that we've been, focusing all of our adult lives on, trying to help real estate agents. The real estate agents are the people that we've chosen But what were the chances of actually finding a brokerage like EXP that would be perfectly in alignment with what our own personal, life mission was? I do feel blessed, honestly.
I do. My only regret is we didn't do it sooner.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it was so radically forward thinking that it's not something that I think you would like naturally go Google for. Is there a real estate company that has all these 16 million different things that are super awesome? You wouldn't go searching for that. So if I had any regret, it's not doing it sooner, and that's why we talk about it so much. But that they can't say the same thing.
I'm going to edit that, wishing we would have done it sooner, because I have to tell you, it's gotten so much. I hate to use this word because I'll get criticism for it. Easier.
Well, that's true. You don't have to answer what's EXP.
Right.
Things like
it's
that.
Gotten
so
so much.
True.
It's got so much easier. And a year and a half ago, hell, even a year ago.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the fact that you're a shareholder and you get stock in the company. People would even, well, what does that even mean? Who knows what the stock is going to do? Well, let me tell you, it's gone up by 400% this year. So there's that.
But that's something you hear too from EXP agents, especially that are newer to the company, is there was still this sense that, well, if the stock ends up being something, that's a little bonus, okay? And then they always say the same thing. You're not going to believe what showed up in my bank account today. This is the best thing ever, especially the first time they see it, right?
Yeah.
So, and then they realize that there's more where that came from, and it's a real thing.
So even though I do feel like I wish we would have done it sooner, I have to say that now is way better than when we started doing it.
I agree.
Because the company is bigger, it's more organized, the company's got momentum on so many different fronts.
There's so many ways to get help with it too, and to your point, you can join and just do your deals and never have to recruit, but don't be surprised when people come to you asking about it.
That's right.
And when that happens, maybe you haven't studied a lot about all of the different benefits. You just ask for help, and there's going to be somebody, it's maybe somebody who sponsored you is going to answer those questions for you, and then you get on to your next deal. Or you're going to say, you know what, this is pretty interesting. I'm going to study this a little bit. I'm going to go to some calls about that. Yeah, I'm going to spend part of my day doing this. So
what we're inviting all of you guys to do is set aside your, guys, quit treating your real estate brokerage choices like it's a religion.
Yeah.
You can't think like that, because it's going to end up hurting you ultimately. If you're not an owner of your brokerage, and if your brokerage that you own isn't making a lot of profit, this is an excellent time for you to take a sidestep and take your career to the next level with EXP. There's no two ways about it. And I know a lot of you guys listening are big teams and big brokerages, and you're thinking to yourselves, well, how do I transition to EXP? I totally get it. You probably know people that have moved over. You've certainly heard the stories. You've gone from being a skeptic. Now you realize that it is probably the last best business opportunity of most of our lifetimes, pretty much all of our lifetimes. And you're saying, well, I want to be part of it. It's not too late, but you really do need to move quickly. And just open your mind to what your life could be like moving forward if you did, yes, have income from selling real estate, but then created multiple spokes of income from all these other things you get to leverage at EXP. If you guys want to talk about joining Julie and I at EXP and being part of our EXP group, we are definitely looking for people that are forward thinking, and definitely looking for people to work directly with us as part of EXP Realty. So if you're looking to make a brokerage change, do text me directly at 512-758-0206, 512-758-0206. So if you want to join EXP, if you're ready to move forward, text me directly at 512-758-0206. If you're just EXP curious and you're just getting started, text the word EXP to 31996. Text the word EXP to 31996. But at this point, most of you, I'm sure, are just a few questions away from wanting to actually join Julie and I at EXP Realty. So do text me directly at 512-758-0206.
Well, and that's the best way to actually learn about it. Don't rely on what you might have heard or,
right,
maybe was out there on Facebook someplace. Actually go to the real resources, and that's why we're reaching out and giving you Tim's cell phone.
Who you choose to be your sponsor at EXP really does matter. It does, because if you choose somebody that's inactive, that's not really looking at EXP as for what the amazing opportunity it is, and they don't have the backbone, the education, and frankly the never-ending support to support you in all facets of your real estate business, including building your revenue share, then you're going to struggle needlessly, and you're going to have to look beyond your sponsor to find somebody that's going to give you that support, which you can, because EXP is full of very enthusiastic, forward-thinking people. But do be careful who you choose. Do be careful. Make sure you're aligning with someone who's thinking as big as you are, or bigger. That's definitely what you want to do. And then, guys, look, that is, I think, a good rounding of the bend for the podcast
absolutely.
today. Yeah,
that's right. And we'll see them tomorrow on the regular show.
Yeah, we didn't talk about anything crazy. No aliens,
Yeah,
no nothing.
something-
Oh no, we
something
talked about iguanas and
Iguanas.
alligators. Yeah, that's what we talked about. So you guys have a fantastic day. If there's anything we can do for you, obviously always reach out. We always appreciate your feedback. I always appreciate the texts. Any opportunity that we ever have to be of service to you guys, just text me directly, 512-758-0206. I almost always return all texts. Sometimes if I get a big bunch of texts, it might take me a day or two. Sometimes I might have someone from our team contact you back if you have a real specific drill down question. And maybe you have a challenge in your real estate business or whatever. So you will hear back from me. In some cases, I'm actually going to have you speak with somebody else. But I am not going to blow off the opportunity to be of service to you. We live by the words that we actually say, and we appreciate being of service to you guys, and hopefully we can be expanded of service to you as we move forward through these never-ending changes that we're all experiencing on planet Earth. In the meantime, you guys have a fantastic day.